It's been 15 years since Beer Wars came out, a documentary highlighting two major things: the dominance of large corporate breweries and the growing size of and interest in the scrappy underdog of craft beer. So sit back, crack a beer with me, and let's see what happened then, what's changed, and what stayed the same. Oh, shit. Sorry, wrong movie.
My name is Annette Barron, and I used to be in the beer business.
Annette Barron was the former general manager of Mike's Hard before this documentary. At that particular time, Mike's Hard was kind of like craft, an underdog. It was a Canadian brand reformulated to be a malt beverage instead of a spirits beverage, being among the first successful independent alcopop brands. Smirnoff Ice is and was probably their biggest competitor in the space, and Ice had launched right around the same time, also as a reformulated spirits beverage for the American market. The difference being Mike's is still a privately held company, while Smirnoff is owned by Diageo. So I'm making this comparison because it's a nice little parallel to what will be covered in this film.
Beer was down second year in a row. They're literally trying to stay alive right now. Beer has become a commodity.
It's just not...
Depending on who this guy works for, when has it not been for big beer? It's almost always a case of, it's what I drink because it's always what I've drank. You could give a blind taste test and most people wouldn't be able to pick out the one they prefer. And even very experienced tasters struggle. I definitely have when I've covered these types of beers.
It's just not the same old basic domestic brands anymore. You got to be innovative.
For big beer, that's code for we're way too big. We can't reach our growth targets anymore by selling the same tasteless shit. We have to flood the market with random garbage or make a worse version of someone else's idea until something starts making money. For craft, this was not a problem at this time. Everything craft was doing was new and innovative. Most of it hadn't been done before, and there were so few, they really weren't competing much with each other, mostly because they didn't even operate in the same markets a lot of the time.
Since 1970, 35 local beers have been killed off, driven out of business, or bought out by the giants. Gone forever.
We can argue many of these regional or semi-national brands were more or less the same beer with the different badge, but with the intense consolidation that happened in the decades after Prohibition, we'll never know where those breweries would be today or what they would be doing. It's kind of a shame, really.
85% of all the beer in this country is really in the form of light lager, and of which Budweiser and Bud Light are the best examples. Those brands constantly have to be re-expressed to a consumer.
That's code for we have to remind people of something totally forgettable.
One of the few small breweries to survive for over 175 years.
I was 25 when I moved down here to start the brewery, and I just started, working on the building, signed a lease, and then somebody came up to me and they're like, "You do know it's illegal to open a brewery in Delaware?" I'm like, "Really?"
It's weird to think now in pretty much every state, the idea of opening a brewery at all is not a problem. Maybe some challenges dealing with the state, county, or city level zoning and liquor licensing and all the legal stuff, but outright illegality is wild to think about still being a thing like 15 years ago.
Moonshot is real beer with caffeine.
Oh, fuck. Talk about bad timing.
It's an amazing effect that it has on you.
Yeah, but your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should.
And look at the packages that they have. The more packages they have, the more room you need for them. This is a 20...
So this is a very deliberate strategy based on a type of billboard effect, which gets mentioned. Basically, when you have a bunch of size formats for the same beer, you literally just take up as much space as possible, so there's no space left for anyone else. It's not a competition of merit or quality. When that didn't outright kill craft, they extended this into craft-like beers. They were beers specifically made to mimic the interesting styles and flavors of craft while intensely undercutting it, which gets talked about later if I remember correctly, specifically with Dogfish Head Pumpkin. When that also didn't kill craft, it made more financial sense to buy their competition. Why make your own craft-like beers when you can just scrape some money off the top of what they're already making and doing? So this presented a billboarding effect of a different type. Previously, craft-like brands that survived this initial stage, like Shock Top from Anheuser-Busch and Blue Moon from Coors, obfuscated ownership by putting it under a subsidiary name, usually the name of the beer. But when you see Blue Moon Brewing Company in Golden, Colorado, you know the only facility large enough to produce that beer is Coors. When they bought their competition, The craft brewer kept the name, and if you didn't look too hard into it, you'd be none the wiser the craft beer you were buying was actually in part or in whole owned by Big Beer. Probably the most notorious example of this was Goose Island in 2016 selling to Anheuser-Busch. You can read this book for a perfect summation of the events and the sentiment people felt about it. And now quite a few high-profile craft brewers that were bought by Big Beer were killed off, have become a shell of their former selves, or have been dumped on the side of the road because they weren't deemed successful enough. Hate on Anheuser-Busch is absolutely justified because they were and are the biggest. Their products are mediocre at best, and their practices are anti-competitive and have often been illegal. Instead, people hate them for absolutely pathetic and stupid reasons. What's particularly interesting now is that many larger craft brands, either independent or subsidiaries of multinationals, have adopted some of this technique with different formats and line extensions.
I can't move anybody out to move you in.
If I work it out, is that okay? Sometimes you have to use a different approach.
Yeah, a fucking illegal one.
In 2005,
And you'll notice that when a beer is drunk at room temperature, i.e. a temperature that you can taste everything in that beer, there's no comparison between a beer brewed with cheap adjuncts and one that's brewed with all barley.
So the big draw of craft is the ability to use all kinds of ingredients and processes and to make beers in styles Big Beer can't or won't. Now, at the time of this documentary, there was still a big hesitation among many craft brewers to use things like corn or rice because of their association with Big Beer. They're still seen as inferior or somehow not allowed in beer. The whole point of craft early on and up to this point was to distance itself as much as possible from whatever Big Beer did. We don't tend to think about something like American Light Lager being what it is because of a whole chain of choices going back 100+ years. I think we tend to think about it as the cheapest way to make something approximating beer. These choices were made to directly solve a problem of scarcity, expense, time, efficiency. It's been this way so long now, I don't really think it's American lager if it doesn't prominently feature corn and or rice. So in a way, they're kind of painted into a corner, and dunking on them for a bit just amused me a little.
do you know how many ads Anheuser-Busch has in the game today? Would it surprise you if I told you they have 10 ads, the biggest advertiser, $26 million?
We think about one of the more recent Super Bowls, Anheuser-Busch, who were the biggest for a long time, hardly did any ads this year. Anheuser-Busch has historically been a big spender and probably had the most memorable ads. Are they trying to remain low-key after their last advertising venture, or just trying to cut their spending because they don't need to spend so much money? Life is Brutal did a great analysis of the ads for the last Super Bowl.
It would not surprise me at all.
Because?
Because they must have to advertise a lot to sell a beer that tastes that badly.
What beer did you
My man.
Probably Bud Light most.
And the thing is that most Americans have never actually had real beer. They've had the mass market version, which is like the mass market version of bread. You know, stays fresh in a bag for 2 weeks, not really bread.
They want to know the people that are...
Garrett Oliver loves using this line, and it's surprisingly effective at getting the point across. I don't know how many times I've talked to someone about beer where they say, I don't like beer. And when you have them name off stuff they've had, it's pretty much all Big Beer.
What in the world is that?
Hey! Any of you that have seen my short on dry hopping have heard of this bad boy.
Here's a company that seems to be getting in on the organic boom. Green Valley Brewing, Fairfield, California.
So Green Valley Brewery is exactly an example of that Big Beer obfuscation I talked about earlier, and this doesn't appear to be active anymore. The facility is still there, and aside from the core lineup, I believe Kona and Elysian beers come out of that facility for the California or West Coast market.
If you're a small brewer, you should be concerned about Anheuser-Busch because they're going to go after every single niche, every single opportunity they can find.
Oh, hey, Maureen. Oh, I have that book. I haven't finished it, though. Sorry, Maureen.
Everything's on the line. It's you know, sink or swim. If this fails, we won't have this house anymore. It's just been so frustrating to see her come home at 2 o'clock in the morning and be up at 7 and on the phone and looking for money and having to listen to people who are bartenders who are telling her what she's doing wrong.
Did you give them
Any of my other beer industry peeps, if one person tells you something, it might not be worth thinking about. If multiple people are telling you, it might be something worth considering. past success does not guarantee future success. There's one constant in beer: the landscape is always changing.
Daily, I will get a request from a consumer that wants to buy a case or 2 or 3, and I can't get it to them. We can't ship beer.
So at the time of this video, this was pretty much a blanket policy across all the states. There are many states now that allow shipping direct to consumers, both inside and outside of the state it's made in, as well as the ability of breweries to self-distribute. Both of these have been probably the biggest changes in distribution since this video came out. What hasn't changed is that distribution really only works well for the largest brands. It does not serve the small local brands. I understand at the time of this movie, getting into stores was a really big deal because craft hadn't really entered the mainstream consciousness yet. I think at this point, everyone's pretty familiar with the concept, even if they don't understand it. Some of these previously small brands are bigger brands that are running into major challenges at maintaining their size, and almost all of that is in retail. The biggest are mostly getting bought up by big beer. The large to mid-sized regional breweries are going through the same thing or combining forces with others in a similar boat. The small and smallest seem to be faring a bit better. I think that might be a major advantage of many breweries in the coming years. Think small. Many of the failed and struggling breweries in recent times have rapidly expanded at a speed and extent that didn't seem wise. When you expand that reach, support has to come with it. I've talked to reps working for small breweries, and the most common thing I hear is that just trying to get your foot in the door at a bar or liquor store is really hard. Few brands can carry momentum on their name alone when getting into new markets. It's a little easier with a distributor, but you'd better hope they can support your brand, otherwise you might find yourself neglected in their roster. It's not gonna sell if people don't know you from what they already have in their area. You can make the best beer on the planet, and if the store or bar you supply your beer to doesn't take care of it, it only takes one sip for a first impression, and a first impression is a lasting one.
Those kind of neo-prohibitionist influences in America do not attain any of their objectives in restricting the availability of beer for the American consumer.
It might be a bit of fear-mongering to suggest that prohibition would happen again in the United States, but anything's possible, especially in the current climate. And there's already been a lot of discussion about how younger generations are drinking less and they might be more open to a type of neo-prohibitionism, but many of them are consuming other intoxicating products like cannabis. Regardless, it's incredibly difficult to disentangle beer from our everyday lives. It affects even people who don't drink it. It generates a ton of economic activity and tax revenue, and it employs a shitload of people in a bunch of different fields: production, hospitality, distribution, agriculture. Convincing the average American that it's a good idea to outlaw something we already outlawed with devastating consequences is going to be a tough sell the second time.
Anheuser-Busch had gotten this big because it had politicians and laws on its side. And by using its marketing machine, it was able to push consumers to buy its product rather than respond to market demand. Anheuser-Busch and other corporate...
An absolutely perfect summation of not only the big beer market in the States, but also Anheuser-Busch in general. That will really sink in if you read either of these.
We've been brewing chicory stout and pumpkin ale for pretty much almost a decade, but suddenly we've been slapped with this legal action of Anheuser-Busch wanting.
And when they can't win on the shelf and distribution level, this is what they do. They throw their monetary weight, distributor pull, and legal department at you to try to destroy what is effectively a drop in the bucket in the market.
I have 16 people who have invested their money in this and their faith and their belief in me and the opportunity. You know, that keeps me going every day. I'm not gonna let them down.
As much as it might have come off that I was disparaging Rhonda for Moonshot, I was really rooting for her and her success when I first watched this movie. It was just really poor timing, a challenging landscape, and a questionable product in combining alcohol and caffeine. She left an undeniable impact on beer, though, as a young professional co-founding and helping to build Boston Beer Company into the massive organization that it is today, and as a woman in a successful leadership role. But the lesson here is that even very successful people can fail.
This machine, to paraphrase Woody Guthrie, this machine kills fascist beer styles. And there's hundreds just like it in America that are, you know, different size and different scale, but they all really have the same function, which is putting a hurting on the bland domestic lagers that dominate American beer culture.
Unfortunately, in a way, Dogfish Head has become a bit of what they were fighting against way back then. Not in the sense that their product is as bland and lifeless as Big Beer, or they pursue the sort of legal avenues to destroy their competitors or anything like that. For most of the area they distribute in, though, they don't provide anything that is any more wild or different than what you can probably find at your local brewery, and their larger presence on the shelf is probably eating up space for beers and breweries that are not too dissimilar to what they were back then. But without breweries like Dogfish Head to pave the way, the rest of this industry just wouldn't exist.
I've exceeded that dream. Oops, should I do this and just hang up?
Just
I
answer
just
it.
want to see who it is. Dogfish. Hi.
But then you see a moment like this where he's literally answering the phone, and I feel like a dick for even suggesting that. Also, Sam is just a really likable guy, so.
People are choosing to support small companies that are on a human scale. Big companies, they can talk at the consumer, but they can't talk with the consumer.
This is something of a constant struggle in beer, but it's been particularly highlighted in the lowered interest of younger people drinking craft. Some of that might be because those breweries aren't making the types of things they want. We've seen that in the popularity of seltzers and flavored malt beverages, but more importantly, some in the industry haven't meaningfully shifted their messaging from stuff like craft not crap or support local to why those things matter. There's a mention early in the movie about a sort of locavore movement happening, which generated a lot of early interest in craft beer. It's people being more intensely interested in goods and services provided by small local businesses. The locavore type thing hasn't really gone away, but I think it's a harder sell now. It's very easy to be doom and gloom about craft and its staying power. It really just feels like a bubble that had gotten way too large and finally burst. It's not dying as some publications would lead you to believe, but it's seeing an inevitable shrinkage. Beer as a commodity has settled into the craft beer world in some ways, and that might explain a bit of what's going on currently. So what's to be done? I think it warrants breweries asking themselves questions like, are you truly better, more interesting, or more valuable than the big guys or your local competition? Are you only communicating to beer nerds or those willing to learn and take the time to understand that stuff? Are you providing options outside of beer, non-alcoholic beverages, wine, ciders? Does your tap room have a welcoming atmosphere to people and families of all types? Are you pet friendly? Do you have food or food trucks? Do you host regular events? Are you involved in any way with the local community? The smart and natural inclination of the more successful small breweries now is to branch out. When your primary product is beer, and a lot of people in the area you service don't and never will like beer, but may like the overall communal aspect of a brewery, what do? You start answering yes to some or all of those questions. Rewatching this made me appreciate what a snapshot in time for beer this was in many ways. It made me a little frustrated for what was the same and not for the best, but overall we live in a golden age for beer. In this country we have more and better than any other point in time for beer here. At the core of it all, I think of the things that have changed, many have been for the better. One thing is really clear now, today and definitely in the future. Beer is just a tough business. So I thought instead to just show some appreciation. Let's raise our glasses to the many brewers who had a dream and vision and went for it, successful or not. Their drive and innovation pushed craft beer in the United States from the little guy just fighting to exist to international upstart and leader of the global craft beer industry. Let's remember the breweries that aren't around anymore and celebrate those that are still making these delicious beers for us to enjoy. Cheers, and thanks for watching.